What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Swinging Sunday Scan. We're recording this Sunday night, April the 17th. We're going to jump into the market, but before we do, if any of this content helped you out in any way, please do me a favor and click that like button. Hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. Ring that bell if you want to get notifications anytime I post new content. Let's jump right into the S&P 500, looking at the ES. Last week and the week before, we were talking about how we entered into a resistance area around the 4,600 area. We have since been putting in a pretty decent retrace. The thesis last week and the week before was basically looking at key levels where we could be putting in buy orders to go long. The idea there was hopefully to time a bounce in the market. The week before last week, I was heavy on the shorts with 2 shorts and 1 long. This week, I'm heavy on the longs with 2 shorts and 3 longs. The plan last week was looking at hopefully entering in some longs around this area, around the 440 area where all these moving averagings were clustering. I ended up adding in 2, which I'll go over in a minute. And the plan going into the week ahead is possibly looking at entering in longs if we get closer to this 4,300 area. We drew it in last week, but if you draw Fibonacci, the 60% retracement area would fall right into that 4,300 area. To me, that would be a decent area to try in getting in another long or 2. And following with the thesis from last week as well is I'd be looking at entering in longs as well around this area, which is around the 4,100 area, possibly timing a bounce with some longs there as well. Moving to the hourly chart, something interesting that happened tonight when the futures opened. You can see here there was a pretty key level that we've been kind of bouncing and retesting for the last 3 days of the week. This is around 4,380. You can see here on the 12th we bounced from that level and rallied. We then tanked and then tested that level again. At which point we rallied, we tested it again on the 13th, rallied, and then closing out the week last week, we basically closed around that area again. Since this is opened, we have since cleared this area significantly, at least on the hourly chart. We're currently holding, so signs point to possibly coming back, retesting this area and continuing down, but anything can happen. That's just my thesis on the direction we're looking at next week. The NQ, the Nasdaq Futures, same thing. We've broken down below these key levels where we've tested 3 times throughout the week. Russell Futures, not really getting a clear picture, but if you were to draw sort of like a trend line here, looks like we broke below that level as well, but we still have ways to go to get below the lows. Let's get into some positions that I'm currently in at the moment. TALO. I have a very, very small position on this one. I've closed out the majority already since it went to full target. But since we've broken over this pivot and we closed above it, I wanted to give a little small piece of a position to see how much we can get out of it before earnings. We have about 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens. RBA is another one that we had open. What a great move so far. This one is around 2R. We have a decent amount of time until earnings. If we don't see a pivot on this one, maybe we'll see target on this one by the end of the week. I'm likely going to move my stop down to around 76 just to reduce my risk slightly. But we'll see what happens. EXTR is another one that's open. We are getting closer to earnings on this one. This one will likely have to be closed out by the end of the week, especially if we get a decent move. This one has just been kind of grinding choppily downwards, but has been moving in our direction. ATSG was one idea we mentioned last week. I got into this one on the 12th, and since has put in a really decent move in quite a short amount of time. We're not quite at 2R yet, but if the momentum on this one continues, this one could shape up well. Earnings is not that far away, so if we do get a decent move, I'd be looking at trying to close this one out around that $33 area, just because we don't have a lot of time to wait for any kind of pullbacks. GBX was another one we mentioned last week going long. This one we just cleared earnings and is looking very sluggish. The target on this one is pretty huge, so we do have time on our side on this one. So we'll just kind of let this one work. I'll likely trail this one if it continues to grind like it did here, but we'll see how this one goes. I'm expecting this to be like at a snail's pace, so if it moves any faster than that, it will exceed my expectations. I wanted to mention an idea from the other week, CPRT. This is one that I got a full stop out on, and as you can see, this one stopped out on this green bar here on March 29th. And has since reversed and has gone in our direction, basically in the exact fashion that I would have imagined with the thesis of popping into these moving averages and continuing downward. Looking at something like this can get a little bit frustrating, but it is important to know that this is trading. Getting shaken out on a trade and seeing it go in the direction that you want is just part of trading. Looking at something that might have been a winner if your stop was a little bit wider can be frustrating, but it's also good to look at it in the sense that yes, your thesis was correct, and that should make you feel more confident in your plan. Perhaps this could also shine a light on maybe considering having wider stops. Each and every trade, whether it's a winner or a loser, is an opportunity to learn something new. Another idea we mentioned last week, CMRE. This one looks like it's got a pretty decent momentum. However, it was so close to earnings. This was one that I didn't intend on entering. However, I believe I mentioned it last week. If someone was trading with a smaller risk to reward, like a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1, and was only expecting this to move a shorter amount, this one could end up being a decent trade. Earnings is really close, so be mindful of that. Another one we mentioned last week, TRN. I wanted to show this one just so that it didn't appear that I was just showing only ones that were moving well in the direction that we wanted them to. This one would have triggered for me on this day, on the 12th, but has since just continued putting in doji days. This one still does look pretty decent, but again, earnings is really close. And again, UNP, another one that did almost nothing with earnings really close. And finally, KEN. Again, another idea we mentioned last week that basically did nothing. On to the new ideas. Again, to repeat, the thesis going into this week will basically look for entries on long ideas to time it with a potential bounce on the market. The next key level on the market would be that 60% Fibonacci level. This is the ES, which is basically going to be around that 4,300 area. First idea I have is BRCC. This one is pulling back into a nice support area around this $21 area. This one I'm going to proceed with caution because the way this is gapping and rallying and putting in these wide range green bars is looking very much like a penny stock, which for my patterns don't tend to be as successful and reliable. But the smoothness of this retrace into a support level, I couldn't ignore it as an idea, so there it is. Next idea, AXSM. This is a biotech therapeutics stock. Not too crazy about trading this sector because they can have some pretty crazy moves as well as wild and crazy gaps. But again, the smoothness of this retrace and boy oh boy, right into a support area does look pretty sweet. Also, this looks like the first time it is popping above this 200 period moving average. But take a look at this. Wow, that's a huge gap. So yeah, right now this one's not really looking for me because of the gap, but wow, look at how smooth that's trading. Anyways, on to the next. ACET, again, another gappy health stock, but look at that smooth retracement into a support zone. Another smooth trading stock that I'll probably have to ignore. CPLP, similar idea as all the rest. Except this one is a bit interesting. Look at this long drawn out resistance consolidation area of around 1650. We got a big spike in volume which broke through this area, and we're coming back and retracing to the support area. This, in my opinion, in terms of consolidation breakout with the retrace and retest of that area, is almost textbook. This is really a choppy overlapping stock. This whole little chop and slop here at the top is not ideal, and then also how close we are to earnings is also very not ideal. If I were to draw in a possible area of entry and risk, we do have 3R room, but we only have 8 trading days to get where we need to go, which for this stock, it put in almost that full range in 1 day on March the 25th. So it's not like it can't do it, but how likely that is, only time can tell. But looking at the low quality of the ideas so far, this one is probably looking like the best one. So on to the next idea. This is the last idea, CCOI. Very similar idea to all the rest. We're heading into a bit of a support area here with a smooth retracement. Again, earnings in the way, but this one's not so bad since we have almost 2.5 weeks. If you stuck it out to the end, thanks very much. I appreciate you watching. If any of this content helped you out, please do me a favor and click that like button. If you want to see more content like this in the future, hit subscribe. If you want to get notifications anytime I put out new content, please click that bell. Thanks again for watching. Trade safe, follow your plan, and we'll catch you on the next one.